Fame looks perfect until someone dares to speak the truth. Under the bright lights, everything seems perfect. But behind those perfect smiles are stories the world never expected. In 2025, a new wave of handsome, brave stars decided to break the silence, break the stereotypes, and live life to the fullest. They are not just celebrities, they are game changers. Welcome to Top 10 Gay Male Stars Who Broke the Silence. He had it all. The looks, the moves, the voice that made stadiums shake. Ricky Martin wasn't just a pop star. He was the Latin icon. The man who made millions scream "Livin' La Vida Loca" at the top of their lungs. The golden boy of global entertainment. Perfect smile. Perfect life. Or so it seemed. Because behind the lights, behind the choreographed perfection, there was a secret burning quietly. A truth he'd carried like a loaded weapon for decades. A truth that, if spoken, could blow up everything. The late 90s and early 2000s were Ricky's empire. He didn't just conquer the charts, he rewrote them. One hit after another, he turned Latin pop into a global force. Every magazine cover, every interview, every music video painted him as the ultimate heartthrob, the man every woman wanted. But fame has sharp edges. Rumors about his sexuality swirled like vultures. Interviewers circled the question again and again, sometimes cruelly, sometimes with a grin. Are you gay? What's your type? Under the camera's gaze, he danced around the truth with the elegance of a trained performer. Because in that era, one honest word could mean the end. For years, Ricky lived inside a carefully built glass palace, dazzling from the outside, suffocating within. Silence became armor. He focused on music, perfection, control. But silence has weight. It presses, it cracks, and eventually it breaks. March 2010. No warning, no press conference. Out of nowhere, Ricky Martin hit publish on an open letter on his website. Within seconds, the internet froze. I am proud to say that I am a fortunate homosexual man. I am very blessed to be who I am. 7 sentences that would set off a cultural earthquake. What happened next felt like the world stopped spinning for a second. Within minutes, the letter spread like wildfire. Newsrooms went into overdrive. Anchors interrupted broadcasts to read it live. Twitter, still young back then, exploded in a way no one had ever seen. TV producers scrambled, headlines screamed, phones rang off the hook. The biggest Latin male superstar on earth had just come out. In a culture built on machismo, this wasn't just a statement. It was a detonation. It wasn't a scandal. It was a revolution. Fans sobbed, some in shock, some in joy. Others turned away. But one thing was undeniable: the conversation would never be the same again. For millions of LGBTQ+ people across Latin America and beyond, that letter wasn't gossip. It was oxygen. Proof that even at the very top of the fame pyramid, truth could be louder than fear. But if anyone thought the story ended with applause, they were wrong. Coming out didn't make life easier overnight. He faced whispers in executive boardrooms, questions about marketability, doubts about his image. Some tried to silence him again. But Ricky didn't flinch. He didn't apologize. He didn't shrink. He expanded. Bigger stages, braver speeches, louder music. He became not just a performer, but a symbol. He raised his children openly, married Jwan Yosef proudly, and showed the world a version of himself no one could script. Looking back, that 2010 letter wasn't just a confession, it was a historical shockwave. Ricky Martin broke a silence the world thought would last forever. He transformed from pop idol to cultural icon, not because of a hit single, but because of honesty. And instead of losing everything, he gained something far more powerful: legacy. Today, in 2025, Ricky stands not just as a handsome face or a hitmaker, but as proof that truth doesn't kill careers. It rewrites history. His decision to speak up opened doors for athletes, actors, and artists across Latin America to live authentically. What began as one post became a chain reaction that still echoes 15 years later. Because sometimes the loudest sound isn't a stadium full of fans. It's the sound of one man finally saying, "This is who I am." For years, Juan Pablo Di Pace was the perfect leading man. Handsome, charismatic, and naturally talented. On stage, he was a magnet. On screen, he was a beloved hero to millions of viewers, charming millions through his roles in hit shows like Fuller House. Every smile, every performance was perfectly executed, according to the standards Hollywood was pursuing. But behind that elegance was a truth he kept hidden, not out of shame, but out of fear. Born in Buenos Aires and raised with traditional values, Juan grew up in a world where being gay was not only misunderstood, but dangerous. Like many other gay men in the entertainment industry, he learned to switch languages very early. He gave the world what it wanted, a romantic leading man, a modern prince. But off stage, silence became his closest companion. The industry loved his image. But what about the real him? That was hidden behind closed doors. And then 2019 came. A stage, a microphone, a glowing red TEDx sign behind him. No script, no director, just Juan and his story. At first, his voice was calm, owned like a true actor's. But then something changed. His voice cracked. His eyes burned from years of silent struggle. And with the whole world watching online, Juan Pablo Di Pace decided to break the silence he had carried his whole life. "I believed God hated me because I was gay. I prayed non-stop for that to change, but it didn't." That wasn't a gossip headline. It wasn't a leaked photo. It was a confession passed off as a historical document. Within hours, clips of his TEDx speech had gone viral on social media. News outlets were quick to pick up on it. Fans flooded the internet with messages of love, shock, and tears. It wasn't just that a star had come out, it was how he did it. Calm, sincere, unscripted. A truth bomb hidden inside a gentle monologue. The reaction was immediate. Latin American media called it valiente, brave. Hollywood publications hailed it as a defining moment for representation. Religious groups debated it. LGBTQ+ youth echoed his words. For many, it was more than just a celebrity announcement. It was a lifeline. But Juan's journey hasn't been without resistance. He spent years struggling in an industry where gay men often had to choose between fame and opportunity. Coming out meant risking the romantic leads that had made him famous. Yet he chose honesty over image. He didn't break down. He didn't apologize. He stood there, letting the world see his true self for the first time. Juan Pablo Di Pace is more than an actor. He is a voice that resonates far beyond the TEDx stage. In an age dominated by sensational headlines and viral scandals, his story stands out because it isn't forced or leaked. It's his own, delivered with the weight of history and the vulnerability of someone who's finally stopped pretending. His moment wasn't marked by paparazzi flashes or tabloid hysteria. It was quieter, but infinitely more powerful. One single man, standing under the red letters, spoke his truth and shook up an industry still learning to listen. He wasn't a loud, rebellious teen. He didn't dye his hair or play a pop idol on stage. Rafael L. Silva was. With his piercing eyes, quiet intensity, and a presence that commanded attention without saying a word, he became one of American television's most unlikely stars. As Carlos Reyes in 911 Lone Star, he wasn't just a supporting character, he was the heart of the show. A gay Latino firefighter who loved fiercely, swaggered, and broke stereotypes every time he appeared on screen. Fans saw a hero, but what they didn't see was the quiet revolution taking place behind that calm exterior. Born in Brazil and raised between two cultures, Rafael grew up between two worlds, the traditional values of his homeland and the complicated expectations of the American entertainment industry. He learned early on what the spotlight demanded: glamour, mystery, marketability, and what it punished. Being openly gay on screen was one thing. Being openly gay off-screen as a rising Latino male star was another. For years, Rafael lived within carefully drawn boundaries. Interviews were carefully considered. Public appearances were polished. Behind the camera, his truth was real, but not welcomed by the world. That silence didn't last forever, however. Slowly, carefully, Rafael began to peel back the layers. Unlike many celebrities whose identities were exposed by scandal or forced into confession, Rafael took ownership of his story. He didn't make a grand announcement. He didn't stage a moment of publicity. He simply began to be himself. In interviews, when asked about his identity, he spoke with ease. At events, he stood there with quiet pride. And then fans realized in a sudden flash of light, their TV hero wasn't just playing a gay character, he was one. It wasn't a tabloid bombshell. It was something much more powerful. The handsome, heroic firefighter on primetime TV wasn't a Hollywood dream. He was real. And that truth sent social media into a frenzy. LGBTQ+ fans across Latin America and the United States flooded the comment section with gratitude. Representation was no longer coded or implied. He had a face. A strong, unapologetic, and undeniably charismatic face. The entertainment industry took notice. Whispers swirled in the boardroom. Could a gay Latino man really be a romantic lead in Hollywood? Could authenticity overcome the machine? Rafael didn't respond with press statements. He responded with work. Each episode, each performance was a quiet declaration. He wasn't going anywhere. His rise was calculated but fearless, like a slow burn. While others relied on scandal to make a splash, Rafael used presence. His presence wasn't loud, it was steady, and that's what made it revolutionary. By 2025, Rafael L. Silva was more than just a handsome actor on TV. He was a symbol of a changing era, where truth didn't have to come out in a press conference, where identity wasn't a burden, but a legacy. His journey proves that breaking the silence doesn't always mean shouting. Sometimes it means standing still and letting the world catch up. Rafael didn't just break the mold, he rewrote it, quietly, powerfully, and unapologetically. What do you think? Can this kind of quiet, fearless authenticity truly reshape Hollywood's idea of stardom? If Rafael's story hit home for you, don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and tap the notification bell so you won't miss the next story that challenges the spotlight and changes the conversation. He wasn't just another actor chasing a role. Wilson Cruz became the role. Before Hollywood had representation panels and rainbow logos on streaming apps, he stood on the front lines. A young, openly gay Latino actor daring to be himself in an industry that punished honesty. In the mid-1990s, when being out could end a career overnight, Wilson made a decision that would shake television history. Born in Brooklyn to Puerto Rican parents and raised in a strict but loving household, Wilson grew up knowing two things. His identity was real, and the world wasn't ready for it. At just 19, he landed the role of Ricky Vasquez in My So-Called Life, a groundbreaking teen drama on ABC. Ricky was flamboyant, emotional, brave, and openly gay. For the first time, a queer Latino teenager appeared on primetime television, not as a punchline, not as a stereotype, but as a fully realized human being. And here's the twist. Wilson wasn't just playing Ricky. He was Ricky. While filming the show, Wilson came out to his parents. The reaction was devastating. His father kicked him out of the house. For months, he lived in his car, surviving between set days and couch surfing. While millions of viewers were watching Ricky struggle for acceptance on screen, Wilson was living that same fight behind the scenes. It was raw, it was painful, and it was real. My So-Called Life only lasted one season, but its cultural impact was seismic. Teen television had never shown queerness with such honesty. Wilson's performance earned critical acclaim and a devoted fan base, especially among LGBTQ+ youth who saw themselves reflected for the first time. But the entertainment industry was not as quick to applaud. In the 90s, being openly gay, Latino, and outspoken was practically a career death sentence. Roles dried up, opportunities shrank, casting directors whispered. But Wilson didn't retreat. Instead, he built a legacy. He continued acting in shows like Party of Five and Star Trek Discovery, always choosing roles that mattered. Off-screen, he became a fierce advocate for LGBTQ+ rights, using his voice when others were still afraid. He spoke openly about homelessness among queer youth, about racism within the LGBTQ+ community, about the cost of being visible when it wasn't safe. His coming out wasn't a scandal splashed across tabloids. It was a personal revolution that became a public turning point. He didn't just break silence for himself. He cracked open a space for thousands to follow. And decades later, in 2025, Wilson Cruz stands not as a relic of the past, but as a living symbol of endurance. His story is a reminder that some revolutions don't start with headlines. They start with one young man refusing to disappear. What's your take? Can one courageous act in the 90s still echo powerfully through today's entertainment world? If Wilson's journey moved you, hit like, subscribe, and tap the notification bell so you won't miss more stories that shaped history long before the hashtags existed. Baseball has always been a game of silence. Locker rooms, dugouts, stadiums filled with passionate fans, they celebrate strength, discipline, and tradition. But for decades, there was one thing the sport rarely celebrated: honesty. In this world, masculinity was a uniform you wore, not a reality you questioned. And then, suddenly, a young player from the Dominican Republic stepped onto the field and changed everything. Anderson Comas was not a household name. He was not a pop idol or a TV heartthrob. He was a 23-year-old Chicago White Sox player pursuing the dream shared by millions of Latin American kids: to play in the major leagues. Talented, focused, humble, he had everything it took to excel. But in February 2023, he did something no statistician could measure. He came out as gay. Publicly. Boldly. For professional baseball, it was a lightning strike. No MLB-affiliated player had ever done this before. Not in Latin America, not in the United States, not in modern times. In a world where silence is the unwritten rule, Anderson took to Instagram and wrote, "This is who I am. I am gay, and I am proud of it. I know some people won't like it, but that's okay. I'm still me." The post went viral across sports media. ESPN reposted it. Major League Baseball issued statements of support. Commentators who usually debate batting averages suddenly talked about courage. In the Dominican Republic, a country with deeply entrenched patriarchy, the news hit like a cultural shockwave. A handsome young Latin American player had just broken one of the sport's longest silences. But what made Anderson's moment all the more powerful was his clarity. He didn't pose for a magazine cover. He didn't wait for someone to reveal him. He spoke on his own terms, on his own time, to his followers. It wasn't a scandal, it was a statement. In baseball circles, the reaction was mixed. Teammates supported him, coaches supported him. But some in the industry were whispering, baseball has seen gay players come out after their careers ended, never mid-career. Anderson knew what he was risking. His contract, his reputation, the dream he'd chased his entire life. But he chose the truth anyway. And that choice resonated far beyond the baseball field. For gay kids across Latin America, especially in hyper-masculine spaces like sports, Anderson has become proof that honesty doesn't have to wait until the final inning. It can happen now. In 2025, Anderson Comas isn't the most famous name on this list. But he might be one of the most important. Because his story didn't happen under the spotlight or in front of a camera. It happened on dusty fields, in locker rooms, in a world not built to accommodate his truth. And yet he made space for it. Under the lights, baseball is a game of precision. Every hit measured, every pitch calculated. But off the field, there's no strategy for courage. There's just a heartbeat and a choice. Anderson Comas made that choice before an unsuspecting world. Not with a bat in his hand, but with his truth. And somewhere amid the cheers, the whispers, and the weight of tradition, a new silence was broken. A silence that cannot be measured in runs or records. Where are you watching this moment from? Leave your country in the comments below. Troye Sivan wasn't a sudden scandal that burst onto the scene. He came in like a quiet wave that eventually changed the entire coastline. Born in South Africa and raised in Australia, Troye started like many other teenagers of his generation, not on a red carpet, but on YouTube, a bedroom, a camera, a guy with a voice so genuine it was impossible to ignore. Millions liked, millions stayed. And from those first vlogs and songs, something bigger than fame began to grow. Trust. When he released his debut EP, Troye was more than just a budding pop star. He was the reflection of a new kind of star, where vulnerability wasn't a weakness, it was a brand. In 2013, when he was just 18, Troye posted a simple, shaky video. No press conference, no PR strategy, just him looking into the camera and saying the words he'd rehearsed 1,000 times in his head. I'm gay. It wasn't a sensational story. It was a gentle, human moment. But it mattered. For millions of gay teens surfing the web late at night, it wasn't just Troye's coming out. It was their coming out, too. As his career skyrocketed, from celebrity to chart-topping, from intimate venues to world tours, Troye refused to hide the aspects of himself that others were often told to hide. His music wasn't just about love. It celebrated boys, desire, heartbreak, and joy. Songs like Bloom and My didn't whisper, they sang. With each verse, he builds a sonic world where queerness is more than a side note. It's center stage. What makes Troye's story powerful isn't a single dramatic moment, it's his consistency. While others are forced to come out who they are, Troye simply lives it. His presence in popular culture is effortless, but behind that ease lies something groundbreaking. A refusal to conform to old rules. No camouflage, no negotiation. Just being radiant, unadulterated, modern. He struts down red carpets in sheer shirts and pearls. He collaborates with icons and inspires a wave of young artists to follow suit without waiting for permission. Troye has become proof that presence doesn't always have to be loud to be revolutionary. Sometimes it's simply being, beautifully, undeniably, in the spotlight. For a generation raised online, his journey has been deeply personal. He's not just a star on stage. He's a friend in their headphones. A blueprint for a world where authenticity isn't a risk, but the norm. Troye Sivan represents a cultural shift, from silence to joy, from fear to freedom. He didn't break the mold with a hammer. He rewrote it with a smile and a synth beat. And while his story is still being written, one thing is clear. He's not just living his truth. He's creating the soundtrack for millions of others to live theirs. But Troye isn't the only face of this fearless generation. Another rising star has turned the screen into a stage for both identity and art. Let's talk Manu Rios. Before the world knew his name, Manu Rios was already building an empire. One post, one performance, one look at a time. Born in a small town in Spain, he grew up with a stage under his feet. By the time most kids were still figuring out who they wanted to be, Manu was dancing, singing, and standing in front of cameras with a natural ease that couldn't be taught. There was something about his presence, electric yet calm, confident yet curious, that made the world stop scrolling for a second. Unlike the pop stars of the past, Manu didn't wait for permission to enter the spotlight. Social media was his stage, and he commanded it like someone born in the algorithm age. But what set him apart wasn't just his sharp jawline or flawless style. It was how he used image as a language. Each outfit, each photo, each performance was a subtle act of self-definition. Where others saw fashion, he saw freedom. When he starred in Netflix's hit series Elite, Manu's fame skyrocketed from online sensation to global phenomenon. Suddenly, millions weren't just watching his videos, they were following his every step on and off the screen. His character pushed boundaries on television, challenging conservative narratives about masculinity and queerness in Spanish media. And behind the scenes, Manu didn't hide. He didn't make loud declarations either. He simply embodied a kind of authenticity that didn't need permission slips or headlines. What made Manu's rise unique was his quiet refusal to be boxed in. He never labeled himself in ways the press wanted. He didn't hand out tidy definitions to make others comfortable. Instead, he lived as if the old questions, "What are you? Who do you love?" belonged to a past generation. His fluidity, his openness, his comfort in existing exactly as he is, turned him into a cultural touchstone for Gen Z. A generation less interested in fitting into categories and more determined to rewrite them. Manu didn't break silence with a statement. He broke it with presence. Red carpets became his runways for rebellion, not through confrontation, but through elegance. In a world still learning to accept difference, he made difference look effortless. His collaborations with luxury fashion houses, his unapologetic style, and his natural on-screen intimacy became symbols of a future where identity isn't argued over. It's lived. What Manu Rios represents isn't just fame. It's possibility. The possibility of a world where young queer people don't have to justify themselves to belong. Where authenticity isn't revolutionary, it's expected. And maybe that's why his story resonates so deeply. Because it isn't about a single headline moment. It's about living in a way that turns everyday life into quiet revolution. In a time when visibility often comes with pressure to define, defend, or explain, Manu's journey poses a deeper question. What if true courage isn't in the answers we give, but in the way we choose to simply exist? Rainer Cadete never waited for permission to break from the script. He rewrote it with life. Born in Brasilia, he grew up in a country where soap operas were more than just television. They were cultural mirrors. Every night, Brazilians gathered around the screen to watch stories with clear boundaries. Men were men, women were women, identities were neatly packaged. But Rainer never wanted to be confined to those boundaries. From the moment he appeared on Brazilian television, his presence was captivating. His sharp features, sharp charisma, and mischievous smile made everyone bow. He did not blend in. He broke all norms. His breakthrough role in Verdades Secretas was a cultural spark. His character was complex, sexy, and openly gay, something the primetime audience had never seen before. And he didn't just play the role. He played the role, blurring the line between fiction and reality. Then the headlines started. Not because of the scandal, but because of his fearless lifestyle. Viral interview clips, paparazzi snapshots, daring social media posts, everything about him challenged the unwritten rules of masculinity in Latin American entertainment. High heels, makeup, crop tops, sequins, sexy dance moves. While others carefully crafted their image to fit expectations, Rainer easily pushed the boundaries. For some, it was too much. For others, it was explosive. The media didn't know how to categorize him. Was it rebellion? Performance art? Scandal? Neither. Rainer is simply Rainer. He never staged a big coming out moment because his entire existence was a statement. His sexuality wasn't whispered behind the scenes. It was celebrated unabashedly in the spotlight. And beneath the glamour, something powerful was happening. In a country where LGBTQ plus representation still faces prejudice, Rainer's presence became a cultural protest. Every time he appeared dressed as he wanted, every role that defied expectations, he broke decades-old norms. He expanded the image of a real man in Brazil, not through protest, but through presence. Not everyone embraced him. Critics called him too much, trolls tried to reduce him to a sensational headline. But he never hid his light to make others feel comfortable. He danced harder. He dressed bolder. He lived bolder. In an industry where many are forced to hide, Rainer turned up the volume to the max. His story is more than just an explosive confession. It's about the enduring courage of being. A reminder that sometimes breaking the silence doesn't require words. It requires showing up every day as living proof that the old rules no longer apply. In a world still learning to listen, who really inspires you to live bigger? Who are your icons that believe authenticity is power? Leave their names in the comments below. Before his name was splashed across headlines as Ricky Martin's husband, Jwan Yosef was quietly building his own legacy, one brushstroke at a time. Born in Syria to a Kurdish father and an Armenian mother, then raised in Sweden, Jwan grew up at the intersection of identities: Middle Eastern heritage, European upbringing, queer identity, and a fierce artistic vision. While the world would later know him as part of a celebrity love story, his journey began long before the spotlight found him. In Stockholm's underground art scene, Jwan was known as the boy who painted emotions like they were architecture. Precise yet explosive, his works explored displacement, identity, and the male form, challenging traditional notions of masculinity. Long before Hollywood, long before his name was trending on gossip sites, Jwan was already making waves in galleries across Europe. His exhibitions were bold, fragmented portraits of men, textured bodies, geometric intimacy. Critics called it deliberately unsettling, and that was exactly the point. Then came 2016, the year the art world quietly collided with pop culture's blinding light. Ricky Martin announced on the Ellen DeGeneres show that he was engaged to a Syrian-Swedish artist. Within hours, "Who is Jwan Yosef?" became a global trending topic. The mystery painter was suddenly front-page news. Paparazzi camped outside galleries. Magazine covers labeled him the beautiful mystery man. What had once been quiet gallery openings were now stormed by reporters and curious fans. There was something undeniably cinematic about their love story. A global superstar and the enigmatic artist. But behind the headlines was something more powerful: representation. Jwan, a queer man of Middle Eastern heritage, stood proudly beside one of the most famous Latin musicians alive, not as a shadow, not as a rumor, but as an equal. Their marriage in 2017 wasn't just celebrity news. For countless LGBTQ+ people in the Middle East, Europe, and Latin America, it was a seismic image. Two men of color, two cultures, standing in love without apology. And Jwan never disappeared into Ricky's fame. While tabloids focused on their red carpet appearances, he returned to his studio, producing daring new collections that reflected his personal evolution. His post-marriage works grew even more intense. Bodies intertwined, fragmented identities merging, colors bleeding into each other. His art spoke about love, legacy, and the strange beauty of being seen. But like many stories lived under the spotlight, theirs wasn't without cracks. In 2023, the couple announced their separation after 6 years of marriage. For tabloids, it was a scandal. For Jwan, it was simply another chapter. He handled it not with tearful statements or drama, but with quiet grace, reminding the world that his identity was never defined by a relationship, even a legendary one. Jwan Yosef's journey isn't about a dramatic coming out or a single explosive moment. It's about visibility through presence. He broke silence not with words, but with images. with canvases that spoke louder than any headline. From Assyrian childhood to European galleries, from anonymous painter to global queer icon, his story is proof that sometimes the most revolutionary act is simply to be seen on your own terms. And when you look back at all 10 of these stories, from cultural bombs to quiet defiance, from viral revelations to everyday bravery, a single truth emerges. There is no one way to break the silence. Each of them did it differently. Together, they changed what it means to be seen, to be heard, and to live authentically in front of the world. Fame may shine bright, but truth burns brighter. These men prove that courage isn't about spotlight. It's about standing in your own light. Because in a world built on illusion, authenticity is the loudest revolution. Thank you for watching. Keep living your truth and never be afraid to break the silence.